Good morning. My name is Forrest Foxworthy. I live in Oregon City, Oregon. I've been a guide in the state of Oregon for a fair amount of time now, and today we're going to talk about some techniques that I've worked on over the years to properly fish spinners. The mistake a lot of people make when they fish spinners, and myself alike, was brought up that you needed to be on the bottom and clunk on the bottom when you're fishing spinners. That's not necessarily always the case. When you're on the bottom, clunking your gear on the bottom, two things happen. A lot of times you'll be underneath those fish, and then also you're risking being hung up. And if you're hung up throughout the course of the day a lot, you're not properly fishing because you're spending too much time having to retie your gear. When you have good flow, it's real, you want to be careful not to throw your spinner too far upriver, because if you throw your spinner a long ways upriver, then again it's going to settle and have a lot bigger risk of getting tangled up or hooked up on the bottom. So as you're fishing through a piece of water, start at the top end to where you don't have to quarter your spinner up so high. So you're going to quarter your spinner just a little bit above straight across, let a little scope out, let it settle just a little bit, but try to get to where you're close to the bottom but not continually tapping the bottom. So you want to be able to feel a nice little vibration on your rod tip that lets you know that spinner's working properly. So I'm not casting and retrieving it, I'm casting it and I'm letting it flutter. If your line starts to settle and that spinner starts to slow down, that's telling you that you need to do one or two things: either elevate your rod tip a little bit or increase your retrieve. And typically I'll increase my retrieve a little bit. So that's what you want to try to accomplish with that blade. And as the blade gets below you and it starts to sweep, it's okay to let it sweep as long as you feel it still working and not loping and not starting to drag on the bottom. Now I came out of the main part of the drift, so instead of it letting it risk settling and hanging up, I'm going to crank that in and throw back out again. You'll notice a lot of times you'll see guys when they're fishing spinners and they'll have their rod tip clear up in the air way above their head. The problem with that is that when a fish grabs that, you have nowhere to go. So what I tell my customers is I want you to keep that rod about eye level, and you have that rod in a position if the fish picks that up and grabs it, you're in a great position to set the hook. If you have the rod tip real high in the air, you can't get as good a hook set. Another little trick, if you're fishing spinners, you'll notice when I cast, I don't stop the reel with my hand, meaning that I don't use the handle to engage the reel. I use my hand to flip the bail. And the reason that I do that is with any of your braided lines, the line has a tendency to bird's nest up. By stopping it with your hand so it hits the water, I flip it with my hand, you eliminate getting those bird's nests. One other trick that makes a difference too when you're fishing the spinners is a lot of times guys will throw that rod tip and they'll throw that spinner out and they'll hold the rod in the same spot. With that blade, what I like to do is I like to follow my drift. And again, you notice my rod tip angle. I'm not way above my head, I'm not real down low. I've got right about eye level. So this morning, as I've showed you guys how we're throwing spinners, let's talk a little bit about how we're rigging these up. So we have 30-pound Suffix braid, and then on that braid I've tied a 10 to a 15-foot bumper of 15-pound Suffix monofilament. And the reason that I like to use the monofilament bumper, especially with my customers, is when that fish is close to shore, he has a little bit left in him, he's thrashing, maybe he's a little green, that bumper gives you a little bit of stretch, which in those types of situations seems to make a difference as far as whether we land some of the fish or not. I choose to use a bumper, lots of people don't. You don't have to use a bumper to be successful. You can go either route, right to the swivel, or you can go, right to the bumper. The bumper knot, you can use a variety of knots. A bimini twist is a great knot. Nail knots are a great knot. I tie a uni knot. The uni knot's pretty simple to tie. Some folks use blood knots. So you've got 4 different knots that you can experiment with and play with as far as if you choose to tie the bumpers.